A white bully thought it'd be funny to cut a black kid's locks in front of everyone, but the quiet new kid he picked turned out to be a fighter with a different kind of strength. 13-year-old Tyrese Reddick didn't ask for much when he walked into Cresthill Middle School that Monday morning in Thousand Oaks, California. He had his backpack, a worn spiral notebook, and the same lunchbox he'd been carrying since 5th grade. His mom had written a short note inside. Like always, be you. That's enough. Tyrese wasn't nervous. He'd been the new kid before. 3 schools in the past 5 years, thanks to his dad's work relocating military veterans into civilian life. This one didn't feel all that different. Bright hallways, faded lockers, that same scratchy intercom crackle every morning. But even before second period, he could already tell what kind of place this was. Kids stared. Not all of them, but enough. The long locks, neatly twisted and pulled back, set him apart. Not in a loud way. He wasn't flashy. He didn't sag his jeans or walk with a chip on his shoulder. He was just him. Clean sneakers, tucked-in shirt, earbuds in during the bus ride. But people noticed. In Mrs. Lamar's history class, a girl with freckles leaned over and whispered, "Your hair's cool." He gave a small nod, grateful, but said nothing. Later in the cafeteria, he found an empty table near the vending machine. He didn't mind being alone. He liked observing first, figuring out who laughed too loud, who moved in packs, who pretended to be something they weren't. One thing was clear, Cresthill had its unspoken rules. There were the theater kids, the athletes, the ones who wore expensive hoodies and talked like mini-influencers. And then there were the enforcers, the ones who decided who mattered. He spotted one of them before 6th period. Tall, blonde, loud, talking to a group near the lockers, all of them laughing too hard at something. Tyrese didn't know the boy's name yet, but he noticed the way other kids either smiled a little too wide around him or kept their heads down. That type was always the same, the kind who needed an audience. Tyrese kept walking. When he got home that afternoon, he dropped his bag by the kitchen door. His mother was making red beans and rice, humming to herself. "How was the first day?" she asked, not turning from the stove. He shrugged. "Same as usual." "You make any friends?" "Not yet." His father, sitting at the table in a pressed polo, looked up from his tablet. "You getting any funny looks?" Tyrese hesitated. "Don't be afraid to speak on it," his dad said, voice even. "You don't have to prove anything to anybody, but you don't let folks play with you either. You understand me?" Tyrese nodded. "Yeah, you're not in that school to survive it. You're there to own your space. Quiet if you want, loud if you choose. But never let nobody define you by what they think they know." His dad spoke like that a lot, not in lectures, but in messages. Lessons tucked in between sips of coffee or when cleaning his boots in the garage. Tyrese listened. He always listened. The next morning, as he tied back his locks in the mirror, he thought about what his father said. He didn't need to make a scene. He just needed to be solid. But even being solid didn't mean the storm wasn't already forming. By the end of the first week, Tyrese had a good read on the social landscape. Cresthill wasn't exactly hostile, but it had blind spots. Those small daily signals that told you who held power and who didn't. And sitting dead center of that was Brent Granger. Brent wasn't the biggest kid in school, but he walked like he was. His dad ran a car dealership off the main highway, Granger Buick GMC, and everyone in town knew it. He wore his hoodie halfway off his shoulders, kept his socks pulled up high, and had this way of turning every classroom into his own personal game show. Teachers tolerated him. Students either loved him or avoided eye contact. There was no in-between. Tyrese saw it plain as day. Brent didn't want to be liked. He wanted to be feared, admired, followed. And he'd earned that with a pattern. Loud jokes, cruel nicknames, and making sure he always had an audience when he tore someone down. On Wednesday, Tyrese walked past the outdoor basketball court during lunch. Brent was there with his crew, Logan, Bryce, and Chadwick, all of them 8th graders. All of them loud. Chadwick spotted Tyrese first. "Yo, new kid! You play!" he shouted, spinning a ball on his finger. Tyrese kept walking, earbuds in. Brent smirked. "He too busy with that hair routine, man?" The others laughed. Tyrese didn't flinch, but he heard every word. Later that day, Logan bumped him in the hallway. "Oops," he said flatly, without even looking back. It wasn't an accident. It was a test. That night, Tyrese sat on the back porch with his dad, a bag of ice pressed to his knee. He'd taken a hard elbow during PE basketball. Same crew. Not enough for a report. Just enough to make a point. His dad glanced at him but didn't say anything at first. "I'm good," Tyrese said. "I know you are," his father replied. "But good ain't the same as ready. Ready for what? For when someone thinks your silence is weakness." Tyrese sat with that. He didn't want to be the angry kid. He didn't want to be the target either. He just wanted to be left alone. But the thing about guys like Brent, they notice the quiet ones. They poke and push, waiting for a crack. And Tyrese? He wasn't cracking. He was calculating. Friday came. Gym class again. The locker room before the bell always had that weird mix of loud talk and deodorant spray. Tyrese was tying his shoes when Brent strutted in late, holding a pair of scissors. "New kid?" Brent called across the room. "Your mom forgot to give you a haircut?" Tyrese didn't answer, just kept tying. "Man, you got a whole jungle on your head." A few kids chuckled. One or two looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Then Brent walked closer. He held the scissors in one hand like a joke, waving them around. "Just saying, bro. Could probably make a whole wig with what you got." Tyrese finally looked up. Calm. Eyes steady. He didn't look scared. He didn't look angry either. Just locked in. "You good?" Tyrese asked, voice low. Brent blinked. "What?" I said, "Are you good?" Brent stared at him, thrown off for half a second. "You talk now," he snapped, trying to recover. "Man, whatever." He walked off, tossing the scissors into a locker like it was nothing. But Tyrese knew what that was. A warning shot. A performance. But Brent wasn't ready for what would happen when the show got real. By the time the second week rolled around, things had shifted. Nothing obvious. Nothing anyone could write down on a disciplinary form. But Tyrese felt it. He'd walk into class and catch side glances. Not fear. Not curiosity. Just watching, waiting, like everyone expected something to go down, but didn't want to be the one caught in it. In Mr. Delano's science lab, he overheard a kid whisper, "That's the dude Brent's messing with." At lunch, someone slid their tray a little farther down when Tyrese sat at the end of the table. He didn't react. He didn't change his seat or posture. He just ate slower. One afternoon, as he was heading to the library, a 7th grader, skinny kid with braces, caught up to him by the vending machines. "Hey," the kid said out of breath. "You're Tyrese, right?" Tyrese glanced over. "Yeah. Just, watch your back around Brent. He's been talking. Said he's gonna make a point." Tyrese raised an eyebrow. "A point?" "Yeah. Said you think you're better than everyone. Said he's gonna put you in your place." The kid hesitated, then added, "He did this thing to a 6th grader last year. Dumped a milkshake on his head during lunch. Everyone laughed. It was pretty messed up." Tyrese nodded slowly. "Thanks." The kid looked like he wanted to say more, but someone called his name, and he jogged off. That night, Tyrese laid on the living room rug, feet propped up on the couch, scrolling through his phone. His mom sat nearby, grading papers. "Something bothering you?" she asked, not looking up. He paused. "You ever have someone pick at you just to see if you'll break?" She put her pen down and looked at him. "You mean like bullying?" "I mean like, they see you don't play their games, so they make you one." She let that sit a moment. "I've had people like that," she said. "College, even my first teaching job. Some folks don't understand peace unless it's on their terms. What do? You hold your line, you remember who you are, and you don't let them steal what makes you steady." He nodded. His father walked in, drying his hands with a towel. "You want to talk to me?" he asked plainly. Tyrese looked at both of them, then sat up. "There's this kid, Brent." "I figured," his dad said, lowering into the chair across from him. He the loud one? Yeah. What's he doing? Nothing yet, just comments, bumping into me, talking like he wants a reaction. Is it working? Tyrese shook his head. No. But it's getting old. His father leaned forward. Let me tell you something, he said. The world's full of Brents. Doesn't matter if you're 13 or 30. Some of them got loud mouths. Some wear uniforms. Some hide behind keyboards. But they all work the same. They poke and prod until you either swing wild or back away. He tapped his finger on the coffee table. You don't do either. You stand still until they realize they stepped into the wrong storm. Tyrese stared at him. Can I hit him? He asked. If you have to, his dad said. But not out of anger. Never out of anger. You hit to stop it, not to win. His mother didn't say anything, but she didn't interrupt either. The next day, Brent walked by Tyrese in the hallway and knocked his books out of his hand. The papers scattered, fluttering across the tile. Brent smirked. Oops, Tyrese crouched down, picking them up one by one. A few students stopped to watch. A few looked away. Brent waited. When Tyrese stood back up, he didn't say a word, just stared. Longer than he needed to. Brent blinked. What? Tyrese switched, not wide. Just enough to let Brent know. I see you. I'm not scared of you, and I'm not reacting when you tell me to. Brent's smile faded. But some people don't get the message until it's spelled out for them. Letter by letter. Blow by blow. It was gym day again, and the locker room buzzed with middle school chaos, sneakers squeaking against tile, lockers slamming, the hiss of cheap spray deodorant filling the air. Tyrese always changed fast. In and out. No talk, no flexing, no jokes. Just business. But this time, Brent was already there when he walked in. Sitting on the bench like he was waiting for something. Like he was the one watching now. Tyrese didn't flinch. He found his locker, twisted his combo, and focused on getting changed. He could feel eyes on him. Not just Brent's. Others too. Logan, Bryce, Chadwick. Even a few kids who usually minded their own business. Yo, Brent said, standing up slowly. You still rocking those spaghetti ropes on your head? The room chuckled, but it was weak. Like even the laughter had grown tired. Tyrese stayed focused on his shoes. He tied them tight. Brent stepped closer. He pulled something out of his pocket. Scissors, silver, sharp, real ones, probably swiped from an art class or shop room. You ever think about changing it up? Brent asked, twirling the scissors with 2 fingers like a toy. Could clean you up a bit. Might actually look normal. Tyrese looked up. No expression, no movement. Brent grinned, and before anyone could stop him, he reached out and snipped. One dread. Cut clean at the base. It landed on the floor like a dead leaf. A few kids gasped. One muttered, Yo! For a second, everything stopped. Tyrese stood. Slowly. Not rushing, not flinching. His face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. He looked down at the dread on the floor, then up at Brent. You think this is funny? He asked. Brent smirked. A little. Tyrese didn't yell. He didn't swing wildly. He stepped forward, calm, measured, and hit Brent with a sharp elbow to the chest. Brent staggered back, shocked, wheezing. Before he could react, Tyrese stepped in again. Pivot, sweep, drop. Brent hit the floor hard. No dramatic pose, no showboating, just clean, effective movement. His father had taught him that. Precision, not power. Brent tried to get up. Tyrese put a knee in his chest and leaned in close. You don't touch me again, he said, voice steady. Ever. The room was dead silent. Someone recorded it. Of course they did. Coach Timmons burst through the door 2 seconds later, face red, blowing his whistle like they were on a football field. Hey, what the hell is going on? Tyrese backed off. Brent curled up on the floor, one hand clutching his ribs, the other still holding the scissors. Coach looked at both boys. Office, now! The walk to the principal's office was silent. Tyrese didn't speak. Brent was trying to play the victim, muttering about how he was just joking and didn't mean it like that. His hands trembled. Principal Rosner stared at them through her square glasses, lips pressed tight. "Start talking," she said. Brent went first. Blamed it on Tyrese. Said he snapped for no reason, that it was a misunderstanding. Tyrese didn't interrupt. He waited. Then he reached into his pocket and placed something on the desk. The cut dread. He looked her straight in the eye. "He brought scissors to school. He cut my hair." Rosner blinked. Her face didn't move, but her eyes did. She turned to Brent. "Is that true?" Brent stammered. "It was a joke. Like, I wasn't gonna really." "You cut his hair?" No answer. "I want your parents here. Now." Coach Timmons stood behind them, arms crossed, not saying a word. When Tyrese's mom arrived 20 minutes later, she walked in calm but firm. She sat next to her son, placed a hand on his shoulder, and looked the principal dead in the face. "Before we say a word," she said, "I want to know if you'll understand what this means." Rosner exhaled slowly. "We're handling it. You better." But the truth was, this wasn't just a school issue anymore. It was bigger, and it wasn't going away quietly. By that evening, the video had already started making its rounds. It wasn't a long clip, just 10 seconds, but it showed everything. Brent lunging with scissors, Tyrese stepping forward, the takedown. And then that close-up moment when Tyrese leaned in, calm and firm. The silence in the locker room said more than any caption could. It hit group chats, Instagram stories. Even a few local high schoolers reposted it with captions like, "He messed with the wrong one," and "Brent got folded." Tyrese didn't post it. He didn't comment on it. He didn't need to. At home, his parents sat at the kitchen table across from Principal Rosner and Brent's parents, Dean and Colleen Granger. Dean wore an expensive watch and a blazer with jeans. Colleen had sunglasses perched on her head like she'd come from a country club brunch. "Let's be clear," Dean said, trying to control the room. "Our son made a mistake, but it was just a prank. Boys his age don't always understand boundaries." "Cutting someone's hair is assault," Tyrese's mother replied coldly. "Not a prank." Dean raised an eyebrow. "You really think this is criminal?" Tyrese's dad leaned forward. "Let me tell you something, man. I served in the Marines. I've led squads in countries you couldn't find on a map. You know what we don't tolerate, no matter where we are? Disrespect, especially when it's covered up with excuses." Colleen shifted in her seat. "We just think maybe your son overreacted." Tyrese's mum slowly turned toward her. "Say that again." "I'm just saying, maybe he didn't need to be so aggressive. Brent didn't hurt him. Cutting a child's hair without consent is humiliation," Rosner finally interjected. "Whether Brent meant it that way or not, the impact is the same. And if it had been your son's hair, Mrs. Granger, I doubt you'd see it as a joke." Dean folded his arms. "So what now? You gonna suspend Brent?" "He's suspended for 10 days, Rosner said flatly. "And depending on the school board's review, we may consider longer," Dean scoffed. "Over a haircut?" "No," Rosner said. "Over bringing a weapon into the school, targeting another student and provoking violence. This isn't optional." Tyrese sat quietly through the whole exchange, his hands in his lap, posture straight. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. Outside the room, a few students peeked through the glass door. Word had already spread. The next day at school, Tyrese walked the hallway like usual. But everything had shifted. A few kids gave him nods. Some just stepped out of his way. A 7th grader ran up and said, "Yo, that thing you did was crazy." Tyrese kept walking. He wasn't interested in attention. He just wanted to get to class. In math, Logan and Chadwick were quiet. No jokes, no sneers. Brent's crew had scattered. Without their ringleader, they didn't move the same. Tyrese sat in his seat, took out his pencil, and started his assignment. Later that day, as he left school, a teacher Tyrese barely knew stopped him near the parking lot. "You okay?" Tyrese nodded. "I just want you to know what you did, how you handled that. Took strength, not just in the moment, but the way you've carried yourself after. Thanks," Tyrese said. "I'm just trying to keep it steady." The teacher smiled. "That's harder than it looks." But respect earned through silence doesn't fade easily, and Brent was starting to learn that the hard way. Brent's 10-day suspension passed slowly for everyone but him. While he sat at home, grounded and sulking, the school moved on. He'd expected students to rally behind him, maybe laugh it off the way they always did. But something changed. Kids weren't just avoiding him, they were talking. Whispers in hallways, awkward silences in group chats, videos replayed with captions like, "Not so tough now," or "Play stupid games." Brent's reputation didn't just take a hit, it cracked. Meanwhile, Tyrese kept showing up, headphones in, locker clean, assignments done on time. He didn't posture, he didn't walk around like a champ. But his presence felt heavier now, not threatening, just unshakable, like he couldn't be bent. The following week, the school called for a mediated meeting between the families, a chance to address what happened and, at least in the district's eyes, restore the learning environment. Tyrese didn't want to go, but his parents told him, "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up," so he did. They met in the counselor's office. Small room, a circle of mismatched chairs. Brent walked in with a stiff neck and a bruised ego. He wouldn't look at Tyrese. His mother looked more annoyed than apologetic. His father had that same smirk from before, like he was here out of obligation, not reflection. Ms. Harrell, the school counselor, took a deep breath. "We're not here to rehash what happened. We're here to give each of you space to say how it affected you and how we move forward." She turned to Brent. "You want to begin?" Brent shifted in his seat. "I was just messing around. I didn't mean anything by it." Tyrese stayed quiet. Brent added, "I didn't think it would be this big a deal." Tyrese's mum raised an eyebrow. "Cutting a boy's hair is personal," she said, "especially when that hair represents something more than just style." Brent muttered, "I didn't know that." "You didn't care to know," Tyrese's father said. "That's the difference." Ms. Harrell turned to Tyrese. "Would you like to say something?" Tyrese looked up, locked eyes with Brent for the first time in the room. "I didn't come here to fight," he said quietly. "I didn't come here to make friends either. I came here to get through school. My hair? That's my business. It's part of me. You touched it like it was yours to joke about." Brent shifted in his seat, silent. "I didn't hit you because I lost control," Tyrese continued. "I hit you because you needed to understand something." And words weren't working. Silence filled the room. Brent's mother finally spoke. "We've talked to him about boundaries, haven't we, Brent?" Brent nodded stiffly. "Yeah." Ms. Harrell nodded. "Sometimes consequences do more teaching than words." Then she turned to Tyrese. "You okay with where things stand?" Tyrese shrugged. "I don't need an apology." Brent looked up. "I am sorry, though. I mean, if that matters." Tyrese studied him, not because he wanted to make Brent squirm, but because he wanted to see how he said it. And honestly, he didn't see much behind the words. "Okay," Tyrese said finally. "Then carry it." "Carry what?" "The apology. The lesson. The fact that not everyone's going to let you talk down to them and laugh it off. Carry that." Brent blinked, unsure how to respond. Tyrese stood up. "That's all I needed to say." His parents followed him out. Outside in the hallway, his father put a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't swing in that room," he said. "But you still landed something." "But the thing about real strength, it doesn't show up in fists. It shows up in how you walk away." A week later, Cresthill Middle held a school-wide assembly. Officially, it was about respect and accountability. But everyone knew what triggered it. Even teachers were whispering in the break room about the incident, though none said it out loud. The gym filled with restless students, bored already, expecting the usual slideshow and phrases that didn't mean much. But Principal Rosner did something different. She walked to the front with no microphone, just her voice and a firm step. "We've had a recent incident," she said, "that made us all pause." The room hushed. "I'm not here to replay what happened. I'm here to talk about why it happened and how we move forward." She didn't name names. She didn't need to. "But let me be clear," she continued. This school is not a place where power comes from popularity or fear. Respect doesn't come from how loud you are or how many people laugh at your jokes. It comes from how you treat others, even when nobody's looking. A few students looked around. Some fidgeted, but others were still, listening. Tyrese sat near the back. He didn't shrink. He didn't puff up either. He just sat in the same way he walked through the hallways now, centered, grounded. After the assembly, a few students came up to him. "You all right, man?" one kid asked. "Yeah," Tyrese said. "You handled that stuff different than I would have." Tyrese shrugged. Different doesn't mean wrong. Wordless respect started filling the gaps that laughter once did. Even teachers began to see it. Mr. Delano stopped him after science class and said, "I hope you're proud of how you carried yourself." Tyrese smiled. "I'm just trying to be steady." But the real moment came a few days later, in art class. Ms. Ruiz assigned a project about identity, how you see yourself and how the world sees you. She said it could be anything: painting, sculpture, college. Tyrese painted a portrait of a boy with locks, cut, with one missing. Not sad, not angry, just standing tall in a storm, while others blurred in the background. When he presented it, the class went quiet. "I made this," he said, "because sometimes people don't get why something small can matter so much. They think it's just hair, or just a joke. But it's more. It's what it represents." Nobody laughed. Miss Ruiz's eyes welled up, but she didn't say a word. She just nodded. That day after school, Brent passed him in the hallway, alone. No crew, no noise. He gave a small look. Not an apology. Not a challenge. Just acknowledgement. Tyrese nodded once. Nothing more. It wasn't friendship, but it was distance with understanding. Back at home that night, his mom was slicing sweet potatoes in the kitchen. "Art project went okay?" she asked. "Better than okay," he said. His dad walked in from the garage. "You hear back about your student council essay?" "Yeah," Tyrese said, grinning. "I'm in," his father smiled. Slow, proud. "You earned that," he said. Later, as Tyrese got ready for bed, he looked in the mirror. One lock still shorter than the rest. He hadn't fixed it. On purpose. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't need to. It reminded him of what he'd already handled, of what didn't break him, of who he was, before, during, and after the storm. Because some battles aren't about winning. They're about making sure the next one never starts the same way again. If this story made you pause, made you feel something, share it. There's a lesson here, and maybe someone you know needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that speak truth, challenge disrespect, and remind us all what quiet strength really looks like.